Hello, welcome back. We're going to do something a little bit different this time around. This is first part of it. This is going to be the first part of a series that I've been wanting to do for a while now. And as you can see, it is called Art for the Absolute Beginner. It's mostly fueled by the fact that all of the art tutorials and art lessons that I see online most of the time they sort of presume that you have some sort of pre-existing educational basis in the arts. Now, it doesn't presume a lot, but maybe there's some people out there that have always wanted to get into art and drawing, but they have absolutely no idea where to begin, which is hopefully what we're going to begin fixing with this series. Now, the first couple of videos of this, what we're going to do is we're going to sort of define our terms. Like if you remember being back in school, you probably started off a lot of your lesson plans having this large vocabulary of new words being dumped on you. They were all words that you were eventually going to have to know for the lesson itself. At least it did when I was coming up through. That's how all of my courses seemed to start in retrospect. But what we're going to do here is we're going to go over some basic art terms that I think a lot of professional or more advanced artists may throw out without really thinking about them, and not really understanding that there might be some people out there who have no idea what this means. And let's face it, a lot of artists already have a reputation of being kind of like unapproachable and weird, and art itself has this reputation of being the thing you just have to get it in. It's not really a thing you can learn to do, which is unfortunate. I think there are a lot of people I have run into that have voluntarily held themselves back from learning how to draw or how to paint just because they sort of perceived this initial hurdle to getting into things, and they sort of assumed that hurdle was impassable, and that if it was going to be this hard right out of the gate, then why even bother? Why try if you're just going to fail? Seemed to be their initial perception of it. So that's what we're doing today. That's what we're hopefully going to keep doing with this series, and maybe encourage some people to start drawing, start painting, start graphic designing, whatever it is they want to do, whatever it is they've always kind of thought about doing or dreamt of doing, but haven't for whatever reason, just because it always seemed a little too hard to get into. Anyway, I'm rambling on a little bit. Let's get started with our first bit. And our first bit is going to be discussing lines, shapes, and edges. I had originally intended to sort of break these into separate lessons, but I think they're simple enough. Certainly the subject of lines is simple enough, but also dependent enough on each other that really they probably should be one lesson. Also, I just honestly didn't have enough material when it came to the subject of lines, so I had to throw it in with something else. And the subject of lines bleeds very easily into the subject of edges, and the subject of edges bleeds very easily into the subject of shapes. So they just run together. They just run together. Anyway, I'm rambling. Let's get started here. So let's say what is a line? Well, like you probably learned in geometry or basic math, you probably learned that a line is how do they phrase it? A line is a thing that links two points. So we have point A, we have point B, we have a line between them. It's kind of a jankety line. Let's see if we can make that a little prettier. There we go. We have a line between them. And I will say that the line is your basic building block in art. Everything is made of lines. See here we have a square, we have a triangle, we have a circle, all of these made of lines, okay? It's your basic building block. We can't really avoid the subject of lines. Now, of course, obviously, when we think of a line, we always think of this guy right here. Nice, solid, black, whatever thing going, black or whatever color we might have. Nice, solid line going on this way. But maybe if we stretch our brain, maybe if we think back to when we were kindergartners or whatever, and we were cutting along lines, or we were doing the draw along the dotted line. Yes, a dotted line there. We might also have just a series of dots that just sort of suggest a line. And this right here is the thing I want you guys to sort of remember. The idea that a line doesn't have to actually be physically drawn on the paper. We're all used to thinking of this guy as a line. We just sort of think of these as kind of individual things, but not necessarily. They can make a line. For instance, maybe something like that. And obviously, it's very cartoony now, but I think you understand what I'm getting at. In fact, this right here would be called, and would probably be an example of pointillism. But that's a little bit advanced for us right now. We don't want to get into all that. Just understand that a line does not have to be a line. So, you remember me saying that we used lines to make things? Well, the thing we make with a line is called a shape. Specifically, a shape is a two-dimensional object that is bounded by lines or edges. That's important, but we'll come to the subject of edges in just a minute. So, square, triangle, circle. These really are your basic objects. I mean, okay, you may have like some kind of, I don't know, weird shape here, but really, if you look at it, it's a bunch of triangles and a square, okay? Yeah, and I just made that completely randomly. So you sort of see what I'm getting at. Your square, your triangle, and your circle are going to be about your basic shapes. Much as a line is the basic form of art, or the basic building block of art, the square, the triangle, and the circle are going to be the basic building blocks of your composition and the forms within your composition. And again, we're touching on things now that are probably only going to be relevant in the future. I just want to show you that anything can be made up of these shapes. So, the basic subject of shapes, let's sort of expand our understanding. As I showed earlier, we can use a series of dots to imply a line that then implies a shape. Well, what if we do things slightly differently? Let's say we have, let's just fill it on in with black, and let's do this. Now notice we don't have any, kind of nice defining line, but we can still tell this is a rectangle. It's a white rectangle on a black field. And it's bounded by this. Where the black meets the white is a clear line. Much like we had earlier with the example of pointillism, where we used dots to imply a shape, like I'm doing now. We can have different colors, different values imply a line. I really like the idea of implied lines because it's something that you see most often in nature. Obviously there's no like solid black cartoon line around your leg, is there? God, I hope not. But it's this difference between the inherent color and the inherent values of different shapes that creates these kinds of implied lines. But we don't just have one shape here, do we? Well, I mean, we have this lovely white rectangle, but we also have this large black hollow shape. We have two shapes on this. We have two shapes on this particular canvas, and where they meet is a line, but where they meet is also called an edge. Edges are the lines where two shapes meet. This is why I wrapped them all together into one subject. Edges are lines make shapes which then touch other shapes and make edges. Right? Now, edges is where we start getting fun, because we can have this nice, wonderful hard edge, but we might also have a soft edge. We might have slight blurring to our edge here, and it creates a slightly different effect. We still clearly have a white rectangle here. We still clearly have this hollowed out black square, but with a soft edge, things get a little more distinct until we start getting more blended and blurrier and blurrier and blurrier until maybe it becomes harder and harder to tell where that black square ends and the white rectangle begins. And this is our lost edge. Okay, so we have two shapes here. We have a black rectangle and a white rectangle, and they meet together at a hard edge. Now on this one, we're going to take our blur tool and we're going to soften that edge a little bit. We're just going to call that a soft edge. We're going to take this one and we're going to make a soft edge on it at first. We're going to get even a little bit further with it. We're going to go ahead and call that a blended edge. But what happens if we go even further? What happens if we take our blur tool again and we just smear this all around? We make everything some vagueration of gray in there. Well, then look at that. We can't even tell what object is what shape is what. This is a lost edge, because we've lost the ability to tell one shape from another at this edge. You see? So that's it for these various examples of edges and shapes and lines. I hope that everyone has enjoyed this particular lesson. I stumbled quite a bit through this. I'm going to have to edit out a lot of portions, but hopefully you enjoyed this, and next time we're going to probably look at discussing shapes a little bit more and the corollary to shapes. What happens when you take a lot of shapes and you put them together, meaning to represent a single object, a single three-dimensional form. All right, y'all have a good day, and peace out.